Remember, your survey is not the end all be all of the data in your community. It's meant to help you just really take a pulse on what's going on and make sure that what you think you're seeing is in fact on the right track. That is how I use surveys. That is truly like spilled tea. I don't see a lot of other people sharing their results like that, but the librarian in me just has to make sure that you get to see it too. Hello, welcome to a special edition of Tea Time. This week, we are going to spill some real tea all over business because I typically run a community survey like once, maybe twice per year. And I do this for a very specific reason. It helps me take a real pulse on kind of what's going on in the world around me, making sure that what I think I'm seeing collectively is being reflected in some data. But the thing that I think is really important when it comes to surveys is that surveys, first of all, they do not ever replace the importance of one-on-one conversations. So if you need to really validate something, your best bet is still going to be finding a few people who embody your ideal client archetype energy and talking with those people specifically. Now, I come from the information world. Many of you know me as a librarian. So in my information background as a usability designer, as an information architect, is part of it is surveys. And one of the things that we always talk about in that world is how surveys are very imperfect measures, which is why you never want it to be the only thing you ever use. However, I don't see enough people really explaining what they do with their survey results. And as an information professional, I feel like it's part of what I want to bring to my community, to you, and explain some of my survey results so that it can bring you some peace of mind. And you can also see how they can be used constructively. Surveys typically have a really low rate of response. Out of all the ways that you can ask for data back from your community, it is the lowest rate of response. If you have a very large list, you will definitely have more responses than I had. I have a very small list. Many of you know I'm a big fan of small and mighty lists, and that is very true of my list. So my respondent size is not going to be maybe as big as yours, or maybe if you're just starting out or you've had a very small audience for a long time, maybe mine are more than yours. But there are some ways that you can help elicit more responses. One of the ways that I will elicit more feedback from my audience is through giving them a giveaway gift. Everybody does not get a gift because I don't have enough things, but usually I have some things that are left over from the Sensible Woo Incubator monthly gift boxes that members of that mastermind group that I run, they get. And I had some extra things this year. I had some things that I ended up not sending to that group because we started really getting into like these very witchy ritual business boxes, and the items that I had were a little less ritual, but they were still a ton of fun. Okay, before we get started looking at the actual survey results, the last thing that you'll want to know is that you definitely want to close your survey within a reasonable period of time. I don't like leaving surveys open for a super long time, so I leave mine open for about 2 weeks, which is typically a little longer than I think some people do. But because I'm a real champion of really honoring human design energy, most people are an emotional authority, which means it takes them a little bit longer to think through things and feel through things. And I have basically groomed my list at this point to expect that we have longer launch windows and we have longer times to take time to get to the action items that they're being asked to do. I feel like it's fair. We have very busy lives these days, and I've seen a lot of traction on my own survey. So you can try this for yourself. But I've seen a lot of traction in those like last 5 days of the survey being open. There's always this big burst on the first day, and then there's a big lull in the middle. So I have to remind everyone. And then at the end, there's sort of this last little burst. So you can try the 2-week time frame as well. I've seen some people only open surveys for a week. I really wouldn't go as long as like a month unless you have very specific audience and a very large one where maybe you're combining the survey with like some kind of an event or something like that. But remember, your survey is not the end all be all of the data in your community. It's meant to help you just really take a pulse on what's going on and make sure that what you think you're seeing is in fact on the right track. That is how I use surveys. So with that in mind, let's head into the results. I'm going to share my screen and I'm just going to walk you through all of the answers that people sent to me. Okay, here we're looking at the back end of my community survey. I'm going to preface all this by saying that one of the interesting things when you really pay attention to how other people are running things in, like I do, a survey, is to fill them out. Pay attention to the questions they ask. A lot of the questions that I ask have been inspired by questions I've seen asked in other communities, where I look at the questions as I'm answering them and I say to myself, like, oh, I see what you're doing here. I see what you're trying to ask me about. That way you're not just asking questions for the sake of asking questions. That's just noise. We don't want to create more noise in the world. But what I have done here, obviously, like the form is closed. I'm using Google Forms. That should be pretty obvious if you're looking at it. No, we will not be doing a tutorial on Google Forms in this video, but if you need one, there are so many on Dr. YouTube. Go ahead and look it up and follow along. So let's walk through the respondents. So you can see that I had 18 responses, which I thought was a very healthy number considering the size of my list. And I would say from last year to this year, that number doubled, which I thought was even better because I feel like people's attentions are even more distracted right now than they were a year ago. So I thought that was really good. Okay, so the first thing I love to ask people is, what are your favorite things at Sensible Woo? I ask them everything from the website to the weekly newsletter. I asked them about learning in the online classroom, live workshops that I've done. We have Voxer coaching days, free masterclass workshops, self-guided learning on your own, live group cohort learning. And at this point, you might notice that you're like, Mary, some of these things seem like they're the same thing. And they are. Learning in the online classroom is the same thing as self-guided learning on your own. Live workshops is the same thing as live group cohort learning. And what I'm doing is I'm asking people, because sometimes the words we use will elicit a different response from someone. It's all in their perception. So I also ask them about business-focused coaching because that's what I do, but also metaphysical-focused coaching because that's also what I do, intuitive guidance readings, which honestly fall into the metaphysical-focused coaching, but a lot of people feel like they're there for the reading, and so I ask about that, and you can see by the response that that term is really resonating with them. So part of what I'm doing when I'm asking these questions is I'm looking for what are the words that my audience is clearly responding to, because ding, 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 I am going to use those words more often in all of my messaging that is going out. I'm not going to use terms like live group cohort learning. I'm going to use things like intuitive guidance. That is obviously something that is working for the people who are receiving this. I asked them about Sensible Woo on YouTube because that's been brand new this year. And I wanted to see, how's that working? Instagram, on podcasts. And then there's always an other where people can kind of add things in. Somebody just said Mary, which I thought was very cute. Thank you. Whoever that is. Thank you. And then somebody said, I just found you the other day. This is a very interesting response because I had somebody brand new who really hasn't been hanging out with me, who literally found me and filled out the survey. And it shows me that some of the things I'm doing are indeed giving me traction. So all this data is showing me a much more whole and complete picture of what people, really want. Now I know that there's a little bias in my data. And for all the data nerds out there who are hopping into this video, no, I'm not going to scientifically, run my data so that everything has been, properly calculated. That's not the purpose of running the survey for me. I don't need to do that in this sense, but the weekly newsletter has the highest response at 13 responses. And to be fair, the majority of push to fill out the survey went through the newsletter. So, that seems like a pretty fair thing. The second one are intuitive guidance readings. And I found that also very interesting because one of the things that I have been trying to figure out in my business is what is the proportion? How do I constantly balance the metaphysical part with the very practical part, the woo with the sensible? How am I balancing sensible woo as a whole? And so this tells me, it just kind of further validated a decision that I made at the end of 2022 when I was preparing to design the 2023 incubator cycle, which is I'm going to close down the membership, the coven, which was siloed, segregated off to the side, and we're going to fold it right into the incubator, and we're just going to be full on business witches from now on. And if somebody's uncomfortable with that, then they probably don't belong in that container. And so this survey result really showed me how helpful that was. The other ones that were helpful were things like the live workshops. I thought it was real interesting that live workshops got this high a number, which tells me that people want things live. Now, the things that people tell you is not always the action that they will give you. So right now when I'm recording this video for you, the bundled mastermind, which was just a grand experiment, is currently running in the month of February 2023. And it's all live. There are recordings, but it's meant to be a live delivery experience because in order to mastermind, you need to be in the room with other individuals and talk things through. And so this number was very high, which gave me enough data that I needed to feel confident in putting that offer out. However, in real time, at the moment, that offer has been real slow to take off, but the consumption of the recordings has been pretty incredible. All the comments that come in are all from replays, not from the people who attended live. And I find that very fascinating. So I feel like that shows me where there's a little bit of a mismatch where maybe people aren't exactly sure what their behavior is when it comes to, do I want things live right now or do I want them recorded? And that's just something that I will have to be brave with and to play with and to be flexible with in the coming year. However, my main offer, my signature offer inside of my business is a mastermind program, a 12-month program. It is a live program. Yes, they have access to recorded materials to help them, get work done, but it is ultimately something you show up in person on Zoom, and we do it live. So it tells me that still is the right thing for my community because they like it. It's resonating with them. And I really didn't have any of my current incubator people filling out this survey. I think a couple of them did, but the majority were not in the incubator. So I felt like that was a good piece of data for me to know. Okay. People really like the free masterclasses. So that tells me that keeping my free library is going to be an important thing. How I design that, because I'm going to make some changes this year, that's going to be interesting, but definitely calling it a free masterclass is, those words are definitely resonating. Business focused coaching also resonating. So I'm hitting my audience just right. And then the metaphysical coaching is right behind it. So those two things are almost neck and neck. I loved how YouTube is growing really strongly. And then Instagram, my audience is still hanging out on Instagram. So that was really great. Okay. Let's move on. What has Sensible Woo helped you with the most? You'll notice that I have a test here. So one of my answers is a test. I always test my forms before I put them out. And I always add in something so it says test, so that when I export this bad boy to Google Sheets, I can go through and I can like eliminate that answer when I'm looking at the data. So here, this is a free form. So we can see what some of the things, and people said that they enjoyed. The reason why I'm asking them these words is because I want to find out, like, what kind of words is my audience using? I strategically sent out this survey when I was in the middle of working with my sales messaging expert. She and I worked together for about 6 months. We have some podcast episodes that are hitting the airwaves, all about that process, if you're interested in that. And what we found was that this survey was timed perfectly to ask very specific things and make sure that the language we were incorporating was going to match what they were thinking and feeling. So things like confidence, community, forward movement. The word alignment comes up a lot, and it came up in here. People are using terms like energy. They also want to talk about practical, sensible things. So asking your audience to give you language, not that you have pre-fed them, but that they have to reflect back to you, can be a really, really impactful thing. And I'll encourage you to utilize that same format as well. Now, in the past, I typically haven't asked things like age demographics, how old are you? But I did this time because I filled out a community survey from another brand, and she asked this question, and I thought, you know what? I think I do need to kind of cross-check what is the demographic that I am reaching. I tend to focus more on psychographics when I'm working with my ideal client archetype, but I kind of want to make sure, like, I don't want to miss the mark here. So as I suspected, I was right. I do tend to hit the 40s the most. Transparency, I am 43 at the time of this recording, so that kind of makes sense. I tend to reach a lot of my peers. I was born in 79, so it puts me, I think I'm called a Zennial. The Gen Xers, like my sister, are like, you're a Gen X, but I identify very strongly as an older millennial, and I tend to speak in millennial, and the older millennials appreciate it too. And so I think that's really important. The interesting thing is how much that group doesn't show up here. So it really tells me that I'm reaching that like elder millennial, younger Gen Z age demographic, which, given the type of teachings that I offer and support that I offer, kind of makes sense, because we were a generation that firmly remembers not having technology around all the time, and we grew up with it, and it became part of our regular lives. Like, we remember life without cell phones, but we embrace all of the technology like 1,000%. But that adds in a different type of relationship with the world. And so I think that is an important thing for me to just make sure that I constantly kind of keep my eyes and ears on. I was real surprised that I have somebody in their 20s who filled this out. That was interesting. The below 20, I know for a fact, is from the test. Whenever I do a test, I always just check the first box. So this is an outlier, and we can consider that gone. The 60 plus, there are 4, and in the 50s, 3. This is not entirely surprising to me, just knowing the history of where some of my audience came from. I used to coach for a community that tends to reach an older population. And for that population, quite a few of them came over into my world and started following the work that I do, which is great. Some of them work with me actively, and they're aware that they're a little bit of an outlier when it comes to the main audience or archetype that I serve. But they also have a very clear psychographic differentiation that I love. They're like, show me. I don't know. Show me how. What's the latest thing? Software tech. Yes, yes, yes. And so, just kind of keeping tabs on like, but who are these people? Where are they at? Can be really, really useful to know, because it can tell me that, maybe when I'm languaging things that, if I want to be a little bit more formal, maybe not so many hashtags, on everything, within like the copy, that can help. But I really need to make sure that I am reaching this 40 demographic by a lot, because this data is reflecting that the majority of the people are, as I suspect, in their 40s. All right. How do you identify? This was a really important question that I wanted to ask. I did not see this on anybody else's surveys out in the world last year. And one of the things that became very important to me in the last few years, especially since I've become a certified LGBT business enterprise with the NGLCC, it's the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, is that I'm very respectful of pronouns, because I have noticed that the she, her, they, them pronouns tend to do the best in the sensible woo world with me. I love my he, hims. But the containers just haven't really supported he, hims. And so I have updated my marketing language to reflect she, her, they, them. And I wanted to find out, of the people who choose to fill out my survey, like, how are they identifying? This made me real happy to see that it was she, her all the way around filling this out. If I had seen some he, him, I wouldn't have been disappointed in the least. It would have been interesting data for me to know. What will be interesting is, let's say 1 year or 2 years from now, I run the survey and I ask this question, and I notice that like an increasingly growing number of the pie says he, him. I will want to look at that and say like, maybe I need a special container for those people now, but I don't need to build it today. Right now, I don't need to build a container for my he, him people. I am really servicing female identifying and non-binary. They have typically been the majority of the people who have paid for things with me as well. So that was good confirmation. How do you refer to yourself? This was also important. I got this from another survey that I filled out, and I changed up some of these terms just a little bit because I wanted to make sure that I was reflecting my community a little bit more. They had some different terms in theirs. But color me happy. The majority identify as entrepreneurs or the term business owner, which frequently tend to be the two more interchangeable terms that I use when describing the people in my audience. So that was really, really great to know. I had one who said CEO, so that's fine too. Freelancer, a side hustler, a struggling solopreneur, and I have one, shout out to Team Kubo, that's Tanya's team. I always add in an other so that people can, add things in there, just in case any of those terms don't fit them. Sometimes you get funny answers like this. But overall, this is just reflecting that, yeah, I'm using the right terms. So hip, hip, hooray. Now, if I had seen, let's say, a whole bunch of side hustlers, that would have been interesting data. This person is definitely going to be an outlier in my world. And so I thank them for filling out that survey. But then sometimes I can go back through the results, and in the spreadsheet, I can eliminate them and then just start looking at the majority. Like, what is the majority actually saying? All right. So what industry do you associate yourself with? And here I ask them to type it in. You can see the test right here at the top, but it was very interesting seeing what people say. A lot of coaches, learning and development, community management, etc. I find a lot of nonprofit people come to me too, which is also an interesting thing, but a lot of education, that in content creators. So from this, I can kind of look through, where does this data come into play? This data comes in real handy when I want to do things like run advertising campaigns. Or if I'm doing some searches on the interwebs and I'm looking for collaborators, I'm going to look for people who have communities that fit these descriptions as well. So that is why that data becomes valuable for me. How many hours per week do you spend on your business? This is really important. This I didn't previously ask, and I also snagged this from another survey. 20 to 40 hours was kind of what I expected. I did have a couple people who freely admitted they work more than 40 hours a week, and I was so proud seeing that answer, the honesty in that answer. I know that I have some real go-getters in my community, and I feel like some of these people here may be actually over in this part of the pie. So I'm really looking at the purple and the green, and noticing that the majority, when you look at those two together, they make up more than half of the pie, which means more than half of the people filling this out, which reflects to me a pulse on my community. They are full-time in their businesses. You can see that the next bigger one is pretty much half-time, and then I've got people who are smaller. Now this 0 to 5, again, that is going to be the outlier because that is the test account, so you can eliminate that one. But these two segments are smaller than the other two, and that is the data that I need to show me that I might have some people who are growing into their businesses, and so I'm just going to keep loving up on them and nurturing them. And with like the person who's side hustling, they're definitely going to be somewhere in the red or the orange. But the majority of people I'm talking to, we're assuming that we are full-time and fully dedicated. Which of these words feel best for you? So this is where we get into some of the data that I asked specifically from the sales messaging work that I was doing with Danielle. And what we were doing is we were trying to figure out what are the words that people are using to describe themselves so we can create a better paragraph about who I'm serving and how I'm serving them. And we had come down to these terms, which had been narrowed down thanks to internal surveying that I had done with my existing current students inside of the incubator for this year. And these were the 5 terms that came out. So I ran it in a public survey just to kind of cross-check and see like what would happen. Offbeat is the one that won out. It is the term that we ended up using in the copy, and you will get a video. I think I'm going to put it out next week after I do this one. And I'm going to walk through the sales page and the way things changed. So you'll notice that term shows up, but pretty close second was weirdo. And Danielle and I talked about this term so much because there's some negative connotations with weirdo, and we just want to be really careful about it, especially servicing the LGBT community. But color me surprised how many people picked weirdo. Kid at Heart wasn't really surprised at that. That was another big one that came out of the internal surveying that went inside my programs. Oddball, this one scored higher with my internal people and lower on the external survey, but all around Offbeat matched up on both ends. So that's what happened with that data. And then which of these do you gravitate more toward? This is another piece of that sales messaging that we were working on, and heart-centered was the one that won out. And that was very helpful to find out because it was sort of neck and neck with the existing incubator clients. And it was like, is it going to be heart-centered or is it impact-driven or service-oriented? And you can see these two are like evenly split. And with the public survey with heart-centered winning so much more, it helped make that decision on the terms to use. But it's good to know what other people are saying, like using the terms people first or why forward. It helps me figure out creative language that I can use throughout the coming year. So you might notice that if you see some captions and whatnot on Instagram. We wanted to find out, do people consider themselves optimistic or eager? Optimistic definitely won out. That was interesting. And that landed in the copy that we used. Do you engage in lifelong learning or exercising? You're always curious, Jean. And this was real 50-50 internally, which is why we ran it in the public survey, and lifelong learning won out. So you do see that on this year's sales page. So this survey helped me develop that. When you think about your journey and process, which of these feels best? It's a squiggly line. It's been always on. It's been non-linear. It's been creative. It's been free flow. And we ended up going with non-linear instead of squiggly line. I know on this graph, squiggly line shows up as the winner, but the reason why we went with non-linear is because there was data from the internal surveying that stacked up on top of the public survey, and that helped the flow of the copy just feel better. However, there's still a lot of really good response on these. Now, like it's been a free flow. I might play with those terms in the messaging and languaging I use in the rest of the year just to see, like, does it activate some other folks in my audience? But nobody said always on. So definitely not going to use that term. That's very helpful to know. So you can use these responses to help you make those kinds of content decisions. And then which of these do you use? I use my brain or I use my ideas. People like to use their ideas in my community. And so that's what we use in terms of messaging. Which of these feels most like you? Big heart went out all the way. I still love the terms free spirit and cozy soul, but when I really need a message to land, I'm going to lean on big heart with my audience. So if you ever end up in a situation where you're like me and you're working on improving your messaging, you can use surveys like this, not just to help you make decisions on what you're going to utilize in your copy, but also to help you get a better gauge on the split so that, it's data about what your people are thinking and feeling. Is it everybody? Again, no, it's not everybody, but it is. It is enough of a pulse on your audience that you can make better decisions and not feel so indecisive about what you're saying. So I always love asking people, where do they pay attention? Not where they have an account, but where do you actually spend your time and attention? And this is something that I teach all my clients to do all the time. How do you connect with other brands and creators every week? And I ask people to choose their top 3 that apply, only the top 3. I don't want to know all of them. I just want to know the top 3 because I kind of want to see what wins out here. And the reason why I ask this is because there's definitely been a change in the way people engage with content. And just because people have a login doesn't necessarily mean that they're on it. So if you ask somebody, which of these platforms are you on? They'll check all the boxes because they're like, oh yeah, I'm on those platforms. Like I'll say, yeah, I'm on TikTok. I've got a TikTok account. Do I engage on TikTok? No, I do not. So that would not be an accurate answer. So I'm trying to get down to a level of accuracy. And I would encourage you to totally steal this question and use it in your own community. And I think you might be surprised on some of the things. I was very surprised this year. I was not surprised by newsletters. Again, remember that note about bias. There's a little bit of bias in the survey because my people are answering through predominantly an email newsletter. So if they're reading mine, they're probably reading other people's newsletters too. So there's a little bit of a bias there. I recognize that. However, it's good to know that they are avid email newsletter readers. But for the first year in 3-4 years now, Facebook won out over Instagram. I was so surprised. And so that data told me, maybe people are doing more things on Facebook than I thought. I had really thought that Facebook is really starting to die in my audience. Last year, especially, the results were completely opposite. Facebook was like down here and Instagram was all the way up. So, maybe there's something happening there. I have started spending a little bit more time on Facebook. I've been a little bit more active in other people's communities. Does it mean that I need to suddenly build a Facebook group? No, it does not. But it does mean that if somebody is doing something in Facebook, maybe I won't avoid it so much. I broke up with Facebook many years ago. I really maintain it just for administrative purposes because the parent company Meta also owns Instagram, which means that whenever I want to do advertising campaigns, like I have to have an account through there. So what you want to do is really think critically in that way about what this tells you. So I'm probably just going to be real curious about Facebook for the coming year. I'm still going to be real hot and heavy on Instagram because that's what I do. TikTok has gone up a little bit. It's neck and neck with LinkedIn, which I find real interesting. Still don't have people who are doing anything on Pinterest. However, that doesn't mean I won't do things on Pinterest because Pinterest is a fantastic search engine, but that is for another video on another day. I still have some people who are on Twitter. YouTube, the number has gone up from the previous year, which was also interesting to see. Podcasts kind of like stays within a certain range. This chatting and private member spaces number went way up. And that I think is very, very telling. I sometimes wonder if the chat and private member spaces is correlated a bit with Facebook because you can have private Facebook groups or you can have, DMs. And Facebook has actually a pretty decent DM mailbox for you to communicate. So there could be some correlation there. Maybe. We'll see. Crowdcast is a platform I used to use and I was just real curious because there are some content creators who broadcast from there and I was curious with the social aspect of it. How many of my people pay attention? Clubhouse, as we all know, had its moment. Definitely a niche audience now and definitely not my audience. So that tells me I'm not going to worry about Clubhouse. And then I always ask for again, I just found you on YouTube. That was interesting. Texting. This one cracked me up. Kitty porn on IG. So if you don't know who Mr. Giles is, he is my very old, curmudgeonly, grumpy cat. And I put him on Instagram all the time. He gets so many likes. It's insane. I'm like, do I just need to have whiskers on my face or something? I don't know. He is very cute. He has a lot of disdain for this world. I think that's why people love him. But I thought it was hilarious that somebody put that in. So I always love it when people give me something to laugh at in those answers. The face-to-face with colleagues one was interesting. When I look at this face-to-face with colleagues, it makes me think about the answers at the very beginning with the live delivery, the being live on courses and workshops and retreats and all those things. So that is just like a little nugget there. That's just a little nugget to help me out. So I would encourage you to ask your audience these questions, and you don't even have to poll people to ask these questions. Like if you've got, I always say without overthinking it, call up the names and faces of the top 3 people that you can ask for honest answers in your business. Not your mom, right? And usually you can do that. Oftentimes they have paid for something in your world, and just ask them hey, without overthinking, the top 3 places that you pay attention, not where you have an account, but where do you actually pay attention, and just ask them. And they'll rattle it off real quick. Everybody knows which apps they open all the time. So give that a try. And then that way you can put down the other marketing pressure. I can't tell you how many people are always like, Mary, you should be on LinkedIn. It's a professional audience. I'm like, have you seen my survey results year after year? LinkedIn always ranks among the lowest. Same with Twitter, no, I'm not going to fire up a huge campaign in either of those areas. Not today, not right now, not with the resources that I have, and the lack of resources that I have in other areas. I know where my people are being nurtured. I'm going to make sure the email newsletter goes out every week. I might be paying more attention on Facebook this year. I'm definitely going to be spending my time on Instagram. I'm going to grow my YouTube. And I'm going to join collaborations in private member spaces. I've already booked a few, and because of this data. So I think that is an important thing. to gauge for yourself. So hopefully my explanation just helped you there. I always love to ask if you could hear me on someone's podcast, who would it be? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go follow these podcasts. I'm also going to put them on my pitch lists. And so, I'll look through these and just kind of see. I think it's interesting. Like, I rarely listen to podcasts. Like, sometimes I'll go back and like these two, there's three here. I don't listen to podcasts. I'm not sure. I honestly don't do podcasts. I rarely listen to podcasts. In the Google Sheets, I will go back and match those up with the people. And when I'm playing with my data and just constantly like massaging it a little bit, I might extract those just so I can see, like, if those people are not listening to podcasts and I extract their answers, then when I'm writing a pitch to some of these podcasts that the other people have suggested, I might not use certain terms that they have filled out up here. Like, if it changes the data up there, I'll change my messaging, because I know that it will land better with the audience that I'm reaching. So that's how I start to tie all of that data together. What are the top 3 email newsletters you read each week or month? I leave Sensible Woo as an option in there. I tell them don't leave me out. So you've got like Sensible Woo, yours. I do that on purpose. I want to see, like, where do I rank in that? My audience tends to be pretty honest. They're not just trying to blow smoke up my ass, like they're really actually telling me the truth. But this tells me what I want to pay attention to. And then that way I can actually see what other people are hearing about, because we get primed from so many sources of information. The librarian in me will tell you how much we get primed. And when we're primed to hear things and I want to use a different term, that information is going to teach me maybe I need to help build a bridge for my audience. And as much as I want to use XYZ term, they are used to hearing A, B, C. So like right now, there's kind of this early dialogue happening about, is coach the right term to use? Like, but everyone's been primed to operate with the word coach right now. So if I suddenly change myself into a title like, Wizard of the Universe, they're not going to know what to do with that. And so I really want to pay attention to that in the things that they are also listening to. All right, tell me the names of the top 3 favorite brands. Do not include Sensible Woo. This is where I'm going to look up all these people's information. I'm going to subscribe to their emails. I'm going to subscribe to their YouTube channels. I'm going to stalk them on Instagram. I'm going to listen to them on podcasts, and I'm going to start incorporating them into, is this person in alignment with me? Does that feel right? How big are they? Like, Ava DuVernay is huge. I would love to work my way up to that, but maybe not the first pitch that I'll send out, right? Same as Seth Godin. But maybe I can do something with, some of these smaller brands, work my way up, start building a repertoire of fresh guesting spots and so forth. Some of these people might do really interesting things, so I find that would be pretty interesting. All right. This is a question that I decided to get brave and bold and asked this year. How much revenue did your business make this year in 2022? I asked them to round up if they know they're going to bring in more revenue before the end of the year, because this survey went out, I think it was, the survey went out at the beginning of the 4th quarter, if I recall correctly. So I still knew they had about a quarter to go, a little less than a full quarter to go. And a lot of online businesses do a lot of sales before the end of the year, because we like to make a bunch of revenue before, that tax year closes. So this was a very interesting response. When I went over these results with my incubator crowd, one of the people asked me, and it's what inspired me to do this walkthrough. And she said, "Were you really disappointed when you saw that so many people were 0 to 25K?" And I said, on the outset, you might think that, but there are 2 factors here. The first factor is that I have a test answer in here, which is going to be 0 to 25K. So that number is actually smaller. It's only 6 out of the total. But when you look at the addition of the other three colors, this is more than half of the pie. And that is the significant part. Not the number where you're like, oh shit, people aren't making any money. How are they going to pay for my programs? Well, we've already seen in some of the earlier data that I've got at least one side hustler who pays attention to my world. I've got people who are still working day jobs. I've got people who don't think of their business as the exclusive breadwinning revenue source for their lives. That's fine. That's fine. But these other colors, that 5 of them who answered are making 25 to 50K seems real standard, especially given that she, hers was the number one pronoun. So women tend to be still building, and there is a money hump when it comes to women-owned businesses. I'm not surprised to see that. And then I've got 3 people with the 50 to 100K, which is woohoo. And then I've got 3 people who are well into the 6 figures. Super huge congrats to all of you. If I had seen people in the 250K plus, these higher numbers, I would have started to think to myself, I have to actually adjust my offer because I have primed my offer for these color, for the red, orange, and green. The incubator is primed for these revenue groups. And seeing this number here tells me that I think I have a nice audience that is growing with me, and eventually they'll work their way up into the pie as well. So when you see answers on your data, you want to turn on that critical thinking part. And this is why I wanted to do this video, is so that you could see this and where that reasoning comes from and why it's so important to go through that reasoning process. I also like to ask, what is the most you've ever invested in any single program to help you with your business? This is very telling because it tells me about their actual experience, not the hypothetical experience, because we're going to ask a little bit of that as we come up. But what have you actually invested in a single program? Like, I kind of want to know. And 5 people, so surprised, have spent more than $20,000. My program is a $10,000 offer, which I have learned in the world of 12-month masterminds is dirt cheap for the things that they're getting. $20,000 is a significant investment. And then the next highest is 100 to 500. So it tells me there's a bit of a split here. I've got some people, most of them, who are going, they're like, I'm all in. I'm all in. So that tells me, with my finger on the pulse of my community, yep, I'm in the right ballpark. We're in the right place. And the fact that there are people who are in these smaller ranges that I'm pricing myself, I can assume that I'm pricing myself pretty fairly. 10K is going to feel like a stretch to some of these because they've not made, say, a $20,000 investment before. But if we're splitting the difference between people who've invested a lot and people who are still growing into making smart investments in their business for support, 10K is a very comfortable spot right now. So that made me feel good about my pricing. And then I can look at what are some of the other things. 2 people have spent more than 10,000. So, between these 2, that is a significant piece of this pie already. I've got 1 person who spent more than 5,000, 1 person in the 3,000 range, 2 in the 1,000 range, 1 only 500 to 1,000. This is that 1 to 500 range, which is pretty typical of like small workshops and things like that. And I've got 1 person who spends $0. Oh wait, that's the test. Sorry, even I just forgot. So the test one is $0. So everyone who answered this survey has spent money in their business. They have invested in support in their business. And that is a really important thing. So when you're looking at answers like this one, where it's like, oh my gosh, these people, they're not making a whole lot of money. How are they going to buy a high dollar offer? Well, when we look at what the audience is actually doing, they're active, they're investing. This is a good sign. This is a good pulse that I've got going on. So I feel really good about the people that I'm reaching. I loved asking this. Do you have a professional development budget prepared for 2023? How much do you plan to invest in learning and development? And the majority of people, I have no budget. I just sort of wing it each year. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of what I thought might happen. And I was kind of hoping it wouldn't, but it was. The I only do free stuff was the test. It's the first answer. So I can throw that out. And again, it correlates with this data here that the people answering my survey do invest in their businesses. So I'm on the right track with my people. But the next highest was people who've planned to spend 1,000 to 5,000 or 500 to 1,000. And then that question came up again inside of our incubator session, where I was asked, like, isn't that a little disheartening that like nobody's declared that they're prepared to spend $10,000? And I'm not surprised. And the reason why is because I don't think most people, if your answer is, I have no budget, I just sort of wing it each year, you don't wake up in the morning and think like, I think I'm going to plan to spend $10,000 today. Like they don't actually think that. So they're not in a planning frame of mind, which is a very interesting thing. And it tells me a little bit about how I need to approach my audience when I'm presenting my offer to them. This is more evidence, further evidence that confirms why I make certain decisions in my business, which includes leaving longer windows with the cart open, not just because of the human design, because most of us are emotional authorities. We need to ride through our emotions before we come to a decision and so we can feel good about it. But also because like I am adamant, I do not sell things to people who are in fight or flight. I will not use squeeze tactics. And in order to abide by that ethos, I have to give people time, especially if they have no budget. They're just sort of winging it. They need to come to the offer. They need to consider it. They need to think about it. It doesn't mean that they don't have money. It doesn't mean that they don't spend money. That has been confirmed up here in these two areas. But they do need time. The one factor that is missing in that equation then is time. So if you ask your audience these questions and you get brave about asking it, and again, like these were optional, but everybody answered them, you'll find some really interesting things. The thing I am going to pay attention to are these two bigger pieces of the pie, the 1,000 to 5,000 and the 500 to 1,000. After the doors close on the 2023 incubator cycle, we'll start in April this year. And then we go through March of the following year. So that leaves me, 11 months, 12 more months basically of time to experiment and do smaller pop-up offers, do smaller workshops, etc. I am going to err on the side of the 500 to 1,000 price range and the $1,000 to $5,000 price range, which honestly was a bit of a shift for me because typically I sell things that are pop-ups at a cheaper price point than this. Like right now, the bundled mastermind is running. And if you want to be in the room and do it live, I tried like the metaphysical numbering this time. And so it's $333. Well, guess what? That's less than the 500 range. And it really has me considering like, maybe I underpriced it. Psychology is an interesting thing. If we put things in a place where people are like, yeah, I was prepared to spend that. I want to spend that amount of money. And they see a different amount of money. Sometimes they don't make that decision. So all of these things rattle around in my brain while I'm operating with you in real life. But I would encourage you to start getting inquisitive in this way about your audience. Then we're going to look at tell me about your biggest struggles. And this is a great question. I swiped the format from another survey, but I changed the struggles. And the things that won out, the big one was putting on my CEO pants, finding my inner strength to play bigger. This was very satisfying to see because I really build the incubator and all of the smaller things that we do and all of the content I put out in the spirit of putting on your CEO pants. And that really is like the root of everything that we do around here. So that told me, yes, I'm on the right track. Like they're not asking for something that's like super specific and just leaving that off the table. The next highest was getting comfortable being seen in photos and videos, being on stage. This is something that has been asked of me because I have been moderating in large audiences over the last couple of years, and I've gotten pretty good at it. I enjoy it. I have a lot of fun. Sometimes I wonder if I should have a career in TV hosting. I don't know. But at the moment, I get asked to do moderation. And I've had questions come to me, can you teach me how to do that too? So this tells me a couple bits of data in the vein of, can you teach me how to do that too? With that number being so high, guess what that's probably going to become? That's going to become a smaller offer that gets run in the second half of 2023 for sure. The other thing that this tells me is that the systems framework and the systems mindset that I focus on as the main dish at Sensible Woo, that and the metaphysical component of really knowing yourself, you are your best system, that is in service of this goal, getting comfortable being seen in photos and videos and being on stage in front of an audience. Because when you have those components in place, when you have your system supporting you, when you know yourself as a system, you feel a lot more confident. And so it eliminates more of the things you need to worry about when you're on stage, fewer things to keep track of. So those are the two parts around data on an answer like that. The next two that were neck and neck were finding more people, getting more customers. That I'm not surprised. I'm actually kind of surprised the number's not higher in a way. And then project scoping. So this all falls right into place with what we're doing in Incubator. It also helped inform the sales page messaging that has gone out now for the cart open for the 2023 cycle of the Incubator. So making sure that these things were really clear and that those were parts of the value that you get out of the program, that was something that the survey results helped me do. And then we also have identifying what makes me truly authentic so I can build a stronger brand, and finding community that supports me. So these things also have authenticity and community have become a big part of the messaging to explain the value, because that was something that I noticed that I needed to get better at in how I reach my audience and tell them about the offer. I was not surprised at time management and general productivity ended up, rounding out sort of that top line of results, answers. Those are some of the hottest topics that we get into that carry through all 12 months of the incubator. So that was also really useful. Below this answer, we get into the giveaway answers. I'm not going to scroll down because we get into people's personal data. But that is how the data came out in the end. I hope that this was really useful. I know that I can see on my Loom clock that I've been really yakking away and talking here for a while. Well, there you have it. That's all the data. It was a very long video. If you stuck to the end, kudos to you. Thank you. I hope that my librarian brain on fire was useful and that you see how somebody can run a good survey and get good results from it and make better critical decisions for your content, for your offers, for operating with your audience, making sure that you are also in alignment with the people that you are attracting and vice versa. And, just remember that the actions of your audience are not always going to match up with the things that they tell you in the survey, which is where you really want to keep your noggin screwed on real tight and real straight. And you always want to be paying attention to the results from every offer. Pay attention to how truthful does your audience tend to be when they answer you. I have done this enough now that I know that when my audience answers, pretty much they're being pretty truthful. But you can see some examples in my own survey results where people struggled a little bit to match up their actions to the answers that they gave me. Thank you for hanging out with me. I super appreciate you checking out this very nerdy video. And I would love it if you would hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so that you get all the notifications. If you have a friend in business and you're like, holy hot diggity dog, somebody just showed me all the data in her business, please share it. Please share with friends. Encourage your friends to also subscribe. And in the show notes for this video, you'll see links to follow me on my newsletter where you see this kind of prompting come out from. I would love it if you would subscribe. It'll give you some good data too. And you can see kind of like what happens during the year, because I will always share with my audience when I get on some of those podcasts or I do some collaborations or that new offer comes out. And now that you've seen the data and where some of that information comes from, it might be really interesting to see in real time with me how that's all worked out. So I will see you over there. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed all the spilled tea. That is truly like spilled tea. I don't see a lot of other people sharing their results like that, but the librarian in me just has to make sure that you get to see it too.